My name is Jody Gillespie. I'm the Director for Consumer Protection. We are a division within the Attorney General's office, and our office is charged with upholding deceptive trade practice violations. So it doesn't just deal with cybersecurity issues, but it's basically about 17 pages worth of statute. So we have currently, I have 5 investigators that work for me, 1 complaint intake specialist, and actually this year we actually have 2 attorneys now. Before we always had 1 attorney. The legislature finally came around and said, you know, with all the things you guys are doing, we think that you guys need 2 attorneys. So this year is our first year having 2 attorneys. So we're pretty excited about that. Last year alone, we dealt with about 62,000 complaints, inquiries, calls from consumers. So we're an extremely busy division. Last year, we recouped a little over $4.2 million for consumers and businesses. So again, extremely busy. This arena is one of the areas that we've gotten pulled into along with the data breach notification laws that were implemented back in 2015. As Katie said in her opening comments, this is an area that is not going away. The things that we see through our office are when businesses typically or consumers are compromised with whether it's an email compromise, ransomware, different types of things in that fashion. So we get the phone calls. One of the things that I know that Nick and Travis talked about, if you guys were in their talk here just before we, they talked about a business email compromise that encompassed $75,000 that a business had lost. Those are where we get our phone calls from typically. Time is always crucial. Sooner that we can get that phone call and start working with the bank, the receiving bank typically, it's not your originating bank, but it's the receiving bank that is going to have to do something with those funds. Time is always crucial with those unless you've got a scammer that is doing multiple scams and he or she has not gone out and got those funds transferred to the next account. So it's always crucial on our part to get those and try to mitigate the loss for the business. We're currently working on one right now. Just got the affidavit that I was reading through, $115,000 that a business is out. This one's a little bit ironic, or I shouldn't say ironic, but a little strange because that incident actually happened in July and the funds are still sitting there. That does not happen. And so we're working hard to try and get that stopped. You're going to have a law enforcement entity to help you with that. It's not something that you're going to be able to go back and forth. I don't know a lot of the banks that will work with you on that. They will tell you, some of them will tell you that, okay, we'll go ahead and we'll place a hold on those funds for you. A hold doesn't do anything for it. The scammers know the banking industry better than most of us. They know that all they have to do is go in and have somebody that has opened up that account for them here in the United States because it makes that transaction seem more plausible or real because it's going to a US bank versus going overseas directly. And so they will have that person typically go in and tell them, okay, I need to close the account. Once that person or scammer goes in and says, I need to close that account, it gets closed and they can pull those funds out because that's banking regulation laws. Seems strange to me, but a hold doesn't do anything. We did have here several years ago, when we first started working on these heavily, a consumer that they had said they had placed the hold on this account and that they would release those funds back to her. When it came down to it, she expected her $7,000, which doesn't seem like a lot in the scheme of things, but to her it was. But she was going to get that $7,000 back. She got a check for $13.76 because they allow all the other stuff to come through first. The bank is going to make sure that they're whole first. So that was a huge loss to her when she thought that, you know, she did everything correctly. So those are some of the things that we work with. You know, just because we do the search warrant through our office doesn't mean that they have to honor that in that particular state. So this doesn't happen instantaneously. We have to go and get our counterparts in that respective state to go and actually issue that search warrant then for us, or a law enforcement entity there. And a lot of times we have good success with that and other times we don't. Sometimes their state doesn't allow for them to do that. We had a situation in Arkansas that did exactly that. And so we had to do things in a different manner. We were able to get it taken care of and get those funds back for a business. But if you get one of those, you know, and I think one of the things that Travis and Nick talked about is what your policies say. Again, our concern is trying to mitigate that loss for the bank, or not for the bank, but for the business. And so time is crucial. And so I would ask that, you know, when you're looking and putting your policies together, to make sure that you put something in there. And I don't know, going back kind of to your policies with the insurance, if there's something, you know, that they can put in there as far as that part of the policy, contacting a law enforcement entity. Each one across the state is a little bit different in what they will and what they won't do. Smaller counties aren't going to be able to assist you. They will refer you to us in those instances. Some of the bigger ones, they will assist. It just is dependent on what their policies are and procedures. So if you have those questions, or that, you know, you get into that type of situation, call our office. Let us try and work with you on that. One of the other things that comes into play with this is, and I will tell you straight up, that on any of these business email compromises and all the data breach notification laws, we have yet to receive a data breach notification from anybody that has had a business email compromised. It has not happened yet, which is interesting to us because I know that there are things that have been affected. We had a situation where it was a government entity that had a business email compromised. They got everything shut down, got their computer people looking at all the systems that particular day. The next day, they received a phone call from, quote, a computer company that wanted to make sure that everything was up and going correctly still, that everything had been taken care of. Well, we believe that it was the original scammers calling again to say, we want back in your system. But they turned around and they allowed them back in the system for 6 hours. So it happens. It's still happening. And so, you know, there's different things that people need to be aware of with that. I think, in my personal opinion, I think AI is going to exacerbate that. I think the voices that they're going to be able to mimic are going to be pretty telltale for these. In my opinion, I think that's what we're going to see. I don't know from you guys' perspective if that's what you're looking at. I know from yours, Katie, you're seeing some of that. I know that there's some legislative things that are coming into play with AI on the realm of child pornography. I think they're going to start using the AI to perpetrate some of these scams. The other one that we're seeing more and more of through our office is the pig butchering. I mean, you guys know what the pig butchering is. It typically, under the 3 that we currently have, it starts off as a romance scam. Those are the 3 that we have, and they get going and get confidence built and talk to them about an investment that they have. And the 3 that we have, they invested heavily in cryptocurrency is where they put it. And the 2 sites, on the particular one, the 2 sites that they were actually having them invest in are fraudulent sites. They're not a cryptocurrency in any way, shape, or form, but they made it appear with the one lady that she had already recouped $1 million in investments. And I'm like, okay, but if it's too good to be true, I mean, that old adage, it is. And so she was going and she sold her camper and her boat to reinvest further in this because this was such a good deal. And so we're seeing more and more of that. Here in South Dakota, we always think that we're isolated, and we're not. In my opinion, I think we get targeted more just because we are more trusting. And so those are some of the things that we're encountering. Ransomware is still there. I wouldn't say it's as much. I don't know, Katie, if you guys are seeing that.
Not in the state, but regionally.
Yeah, it just hasn't happened as much. It used to quite frequently. You know, in the cities and the counties, we do partner with Dakota State University on several programs or projects. One is called Project Boundary Fence, where consumer protection pays for a person within Dakota State University to actually go out to the cities and the counties and do penetration tests, checking to see where their vulnerabilities are. We think that's something that when we started that 4 years ago, And we're continuing with that. I think they're making their second and sometimes third rounds with the cities and the counties on how to protect yourself. Because we've seen that where the counties have been targeted. I lived in Stanley County in Fort Pierre. They've had two back to back. What we look at from our perspective, from a law enforcement entity, is okay, what were they doing with their systems? What did they go in and did they change things within their systems to make them less vulnerable? That's, you know, with any business or city counties, that's what we're going to look at. We look at, you know, did you file that data breach? Did it affect over 250 people? If not, you know, is there an actual loss? I think there's a caveat within the data breach notification laws that say, if it isn't going to affect the consumers negatively, they don't have to report to the consumers. They still have to report to the Attorney General's office for the various reason of, you know, if you've done that, reported to us 6 months prior to that, and now you're having another incident, there is something wrong, and we do have to look at that. And so we're going to start taking a more active role in that. The business email compromise, going back to that, that's probably one of the biggest ones that we still have. It's still affecting businesses routinely, and it's not going to change until we quit giving money to those to those scammers. So those are some of the things that we're dealing with. You know, when we look at it, and I don't know from your guys' perspective, and maybe Katie on yours, we see that there's apps that have been downloaded specifically, and they're legitimate apps that the scammers are asking the businesses to actually download. And so, or consumers, we've had them happen too. So that's something that I don't know from the insurance aspect. Is there a clause within your insurance aspect that says you can't do those outside apps?
No,
No.
so
in there?
every insurance policy is gonna be different, but no, they don't restrict it down that far.
Can you give an example of that?
The apps
Yeah.
itself. I'm trying to think of the two most popular, and it's AnyConnect, because it's one that they're actually using to do the virtual people that are working. I mean, they're legitimate apps that are used legitimately, but they're also including those. So the other thing that when we have people go and actually have their computers cleaned, we will say you need to make sure that you tell them that you have downloaded this app, because they're not going to remove it because it is a legitimate component. So we will tell them that you're going to want to make sure that you get that removed as well. So that is one thing that we find routinely with that. The other one that comes into play, and Katie and I were talking about this, your fake for businesses that are making purchases out there. Equipment is a big one right now. But they're fraudulent websites. They are actually where your scammers are going out. I guess we feel anyway, that they're going out specifically to the Secretary of State's webpage, looking at businesses. Then they're going out and they're querying to see if this business actually has a website. The ones that are being targeted heavily are the people that do not have websites. And so those scammers are creating websites, fraudulent websites to sell things. And once that funds, it's no different than sending a wire or sending that cashier's check to somebody. It's going to a scammer. And so businesses are losing out right and left, especially with your building boom right now. Different components that are coming into play, your utilities. What are they called? It's, can't think of the word. It's for when they're doing utilities, so that they only have to do, it's a third party to where all of them are, so they're not separate metered. I can't think of the word, but those purchases are out there heavily and they're back ordered. And so they're coming from another country and they can't get them in. So we've seen probably 3 or 4 different fraudulent websites that are trying to sell those things. Well, I can tell you out here in the hills and in Sioux Falls, I mean, it's a huge building boom right now. And we've had businesses that have been taken for that. So those are some of the things that we're working on through our office to try and help mitigate and help businesses so that they're not being scammed in that fashion. The other thing, email pop-ups, going back old school. I mean, we're seeing those again, how people are being affected that way. and actually accessing a pop-up. That's been around for, I don't know how long. You know, where you're saying, don't click on, we tell people, don't click on those things. But it's still happening. And so I think people need to be aware of that, and the training that staff still go through. That's what we're seeing. Changing, we had one here that actually affected all of our retired, I shouldn't say all of, but a good chunk of retired judges in the eastern part of the state. They changed their routing numbers. And you know, that first check didn't come in, so they were checking on it and checking on it. So those judges didn't get 2 months worth of checks. And so some of the things that have prompted that, going back to where you guys were talking about the dual authentication and so forth, that has changed a lot of state agencies in how they are actually processing those things, because it was, you know, having to change bank routing numbers. That's not a quick and easy thing. I mean, somebody had to physically go in and actually do those steps. And so those are things that have changed, I think, within our organization. I mean, they do have that dual authentication as to when they're paying bills. None of our bills get paid unless I actually authorize it. And I literally have to initial every bill that goes through. Sometimes you think, well, okay, we've taken a step, 10 steps back by having to do that, but it also helps mitigate that loss. The state's been hit, you know, multiple times through different compromises and so forth. We've been able to recoup things, but they have been hit. So those are some of the things that our office works with. The investment, the other thing that I guess I'm concerned heavily right now are your investment scams with the young kids and on the phones. That is one thing that we are encountering more and more. You know, for some of them, it's easy come, easy go. But, you know, when you're working off your phone and they don't know exactly what they're doing and they're not sure, you know, they're on their phones doing things through Venmo, through Zelle, through Cash Apps, those types of things. But they're also doing investment because that's the cool thing to do right now. So those are things that we try to work through with those people. Again, I think a lot of it is going to different fraudulent fake websites. So those are things that we typically work with. So you guys have questions on different things for consumer protection?
Yes, I was kind of curious, who's on, so we use the example with the judges, who's on the hook for the 2 months checks?
So they ended up, I assume, I should not
Well,
assume,
until the money's
but,
recovered.
right. And so the funds where they were actually being deposited into, they did get that tracked down and got that stopped. It was going through a relay again. You know, it's a work at home type of a thing where all they have to go and do is open up a bank account. I mean, and we see it all the time where they just have to go and open the account to let those funds come in. They take out their payment and then all they have to do is transfer it on to the next bank account. It typically is going through 3 and 4 different bank accounts before it goes out of country. Is typically what we see. I don't know if you're seeing that, Katie, but that's typically what it is. You can see those ads. I don't know if you guys have ever seen them. Facebook has them. You know, it's pretty easy money for them to just open up a bank account. And the banks, you know, a lot of times when we're tracking those down, we know which banks they're going to use for various reasons, but they can go and open up an account online and never have to walk in there. When we're getting and we're subpoenaing the records, they're still, when they're coming in to cash those funds out and pull the funds, they're still wearing face masks. Why the banks haven't instituted, you know, that they need to pull that mask down to show their ID and those types of things, but they're not. And so there's different people that aren't matching up because we've got all of the records. This person doesn't, you know, have the same demeanor, doesn't have the same build from the first time that they came in. And so those are things that we have readily seen with those banks. And so we will notate that to them. But in my personal opinion, I think until we change some of that, we're not going to see a change in it because it's quick and easy. So, yeah.
Does your office ever work with the insurance world? Or is it just pretty segregated? Because I've never, during a claim, never had them call your office, to my knowledge.
Yeah. And I don't know that we ever have. It's usually the business that's calling us directly saying, okay, this is what we've got. Or, you know, one of the counties saying, okay, we need some assistance with this. can you guys help us out? So no, I've actually spoken a couple different times for the insurance at their conference. So we've talked about that and the data breach notifications, things that we're encountering, but actually working directly with an insurance company now. So, I mean, we'll ask, like, when we start looking at things, we will ask for documentation of what their policy says. And, we'll use that to our advantage, quite honestly.
Well, yeah,
You know.
that's what they paid me.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're not out to, come back against a business. I mean, but if they're not doing everything they can, what we look for is, identity theft. And if they're not doing everything they can to protect that information, we have an obligation to. So those are the things that we look at. If you're consistently being hit by these things, there's a reason why. You're not doing everything that you can, or you could have. Going back to the patch, I mean, Experian was one of the biggest ones. They had a patch that was available to them. They chose not to use it, and had one of the hugest data breaches, not now, but at that time it was one of the largest ones. And they didn't do everything that they could have to mitigate the loss for people. So those are the things that we look at or look for, I guess. If you got bad actors back there, they should be shut down. So, yeah.
So are you enforcing breach notification laws?
So we do, so through our office, it would come through, they have to notify us. And we're starting to look more and more at that because we're not getting the notifications. I know that there are businesses here in South Dakota that have had breaches that are not notifying. And so then we've got to start reaching out to them to say, okay, you've got to get us the documentation. And if you didn't notify us within the 60 days, I mean, it's a $10,000 per day violation. So I was telling Nick and Travis that, when we first started that, I sat in a meeting. It was actually Better Business Bureau. They did a cybersecurity deal in Sioux Falls years ago. And I had a lady stand up and just basically say, our company has taken and made a policy that we are not going to report on that. And so I sat there and it's like, you understand that it is a $10,000 per day violation after 60 days. This isn't going to be kept secret. And, after a consumer notices it, they're going to reach out to us. So, you're going to have our office on it. You're going to have consumers that are going to lose confidence in you. So I don't know that it's in your best interest or your company's best interest not to report.
Or it's potentially a criminal.
Yes, it is. So the data breach statutes have both the civil and the criminal component because it does fall underneath our deceptive trade practice violations. So you have both those components that come into play for it. So it's something that we're going to take and start looking at more and more after we get fully staffed again. So we're low on investigators right now. So that is an area that we are looking at more and more, especially again, going back to the business email compromises. There has not been one business that has, taken it and looked at it further to say, okay, they were in our system. Did they gather other pertinent and relevant information that would require us to notify the AG's office if it was over 250 people?
Well, I mean, my understanding is that it's got to be over 250, I guess, victims to kick in to notify you guys, but then there's still the notification that has to go out regardless
Correct.
to whoever is coming.
Should be, unless they can show, I mean, there's other provisions in there and they can show that, it's going to be the,
It won't
got it.
negatively affect the consumer.
Right. It
Right.
won't negatively affect the consumer. They still have to notify us though. But then there's also the component that if it's over the 250 people and it's going to cost extensively and there's a specific dollar amount in there, that there's other ways that they could notify without having to send it individually to the consumer. And I know that's Equifax, some of those bigger ones, they didn't notify everybody individually. It was through means, newspapers, news, those types of things. So there are provisions in there that allows for that as well. So,
Well, in big business email compromise, so it's especially challenging with one of these lines because you literally have to go through email by email to determine if it's going to meet the PII.
right, the criteria.
Right.
Absolutely. So I mean, that's just something that we haven't looked at yet, so. Yeah.
So Jody, are you in communication with the federal agencies? Because obviously some of the laws at the federal level are lagging behind. And scandals, especially outside the country, is all laws. So are you finding them to be responsive? I'm open to that.
So what I can tell you, I mean, we work closely with the Federal Trade Commission. We have a Western region that we get together. It's every other month that we talk. And so we do, and they'll come out. We've had actually the Federal Trade Commission come to Pier and do some different things with our office. So we do work very well with them. If we can put cases together, they deal in volume. For those that, you know, file a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission, you're never going to get communication back and forth from them. It just doesn't happen. But they do build their cases based off of volume. And so we do encourage people to file the complaints there, but, you know, they have hoops that you guys have to follow and jump through. So their time frame is a lot slower than what ours probably would be. That's, I think, the difference with them. And we work with the Federal Communications Commission specifically on your scam calls that you guys get inundated with.
So the banking regulations also, that's a big piece.
That's a big piece. I've gone, this will be probably the 4th year where we've asked specifically questions from the banking industry. Different answers, you know, and until you can actually find it in black and white, you know, you're going to get those different answers. And that's the unfortunate part. You know, if I could just pick up the phone, because I've been bounced, you know, it gets frustrating when I'm trying to stop those funds from going to the scammer and I get bounced back and forth between 2 banks and everybody's saying, no, you got to go back to the originating bank. They're the ones that have to, you know, release those and tell you that the funds can come back. And I'm like, okay, no. So then I go back to the other bank and I get passed back and forth. And so that gets frustrating. And if it's frustrating for me, I can only imagine how it would be for a consumer and a business entity that's trying to stop that loss. And so we have point blank asked those questions. And, you know, typically what they'll have you do is file a hold harmless document saying that you're not holding the bank harming them. I'm sorry, it's a hold harmless document. And so most of them will sign that. And so that we can try and get those funds stopped right away. But again, we do get bounced back and forth. When you get into the fraud area of the bank, it's different regulations, or it seems like it's different regulations or policies within each bank. And so you have to know who you're dealing with. And it's usually that core handful of banks that we're dealing with when we're dealing with the scams. So that's frustrating for everybody, I think. So I think, in my opinion, I think we can do better. We should be doing better. So, other questions?
So we work at a bank, a
Yes.
small bank.
I'm sorry.
No, we don't have a fraud department, so it, on that
Yeah,
line of conversation, that those big banks that you're,
yeah. It's, I mean, it's the ones where, you know, it's the bigger banks
Yeah.
across the United States. Yeah.
they don't want to take a loss on the fraud, I'm sure. But anyway, we've had the occasional customer that's gotten scammed, which would you guys be someone we could refer them to?
Yes. Yep. And I wish I would have put together a slide, but I haven't been there, just to have our toll-free number out there. But it is consumer protection. It's 800-300-1986. And I think, I don't know if in your guys' bags that you've received, there were some glasses cleaners that had the toll-free number on there, and there were some other things in there. So it's got our number on it.
South Dakota.
Yep, South Dakota Consumer Protection. Yeah, you can certainly call our office, have them refer to us. You know, those are some of the things that we work with heavily. You know, and we're trying to get better at having those direct contacts with the bank. That's the other problem that I think we run into. If you had that actual contact, a specific contact with a banking entity that you could go directly to, it makes it a lot easier. You know, the banks here, we do have that. We have the Citibank, we have the First Premier, we have some of those where we actually have contacts, and it makes it a little easier for us to deal directly with them. They're not the ones that are the problem children, but you know, when we do have the problems, we can at least go directly to them because we do have that contact. And they're here. I mean, I can drive to Sioux Falls. I have been known to stop at a couple of those places directly. If I'm not getting the response and they're not answering their questions, I'm gonna stop there and talk directly with them. Sometimes it's more difficult to push somebody away when I'm standing right there. So I don't have a problem doing that. So is that other questions? Oh, what was the other one that I did? I knew I was gonna be, the investment. You know, the AI, going back to that, those are, you know, it's not just the cyber security ones that we're going to see with that. Kind of get off that track a little bit, but we're getting inundated with sweepstakes scams. Publishers Clearinghouse specifically. I literally am dealing with 14 individuals myself that all believe that they have won the Publishers Clearinghouse. And it's astronomical amounts. We have a couple that is in the eastern part of the state, $837,000 in a year's time frame. I have one that's in Pierre, that I'm physically located in Pierre, and they're out $43,000.
Are they paying more
Yes.
to get the publisher clearinghouse?
Yeah, they
Oh,
think
okay.
they're going to win the Publishers Clearinghouse, and they're paying taxes, they're paying tariffs, they're paying, the last one and the newest one that they're doing is all of them are winning vehicles. And so now you have to pay to have them registered, you have to pay the taxes up front, you have to pay, it was the tariff to bring the vehicles in. And I said, okay, but what makes sense with that? They're paying your registration. How do they know where you want it registered? Are you gonna give that vehicle to your kid? What makes sense with any of this? They come up with all kinds of things. The couple that's in the eastern part of the state, the northeastern corner, it's out 837,000. Here about 6 months ago, I received a phone call from New Jersey postal inspectors. And they had actually confiscated the two $15,000 checks that the couple had written. And they actually have the 8 individuals in New Jersey that they're going to go ahead and prosecute. And so I'm like, you know, we're making some bigger strides with some of this. It's small steps, but if we can continue to work together with some of these, because these are detrimental. I have a couple that lives, anybody in Platte, from Platte here? Couple in Platte that they have lost everything. They were to the point in how we got involved as the son called because they were actually trying to sell his camper and his boat. They have no ties to it whatsoever. Their name is not on it. They were gonna sell it.
I'm just curious, how much of it happened in the United States? How, cameras located, like you said, in New Jersey or prosecuting?
Yeah.
Can you just throw out a number on average of what you're seeing here in the United States compared to what do you call it, sorry?
Going across international. So what I would tell you is in the last 5 to 7 years, it has changed to where those scammers, especially your sweepstakes scams, your other scams, your cyber ones, not so much. I mean, they've got people here in the United States, but they're also doing those relays. But the other ones, I will tell you that they're here. They're here in the United States. This is big money. It just is. And once it starts working for them, you got to look at it from their aspect. Why would you quit? If you're making the money, you're not paying taxes on it. All you have to do is sit at home. Why would you quit? And so, yeah, if we can track them down, you'll be hearing a couple that we've got some arrest warrants out for. As soon as they get arrested, we'll do press on them that we've tracked down. And so, and there are different types of scam. The one that you'll hear about is it's a car wrapping scam, where you have to put the car, it was Mountain Dew advertising on your vehicle and you're going to get paid. That is a legitimate business. They will pay you to do certain things like that, but this happened to be a scammer. Again, I think a lot of them here in the last probably 9 months to a year have gone kind of old school, and they're throwing some of our old scams in there, because this one happened to be a cashier's check that they sent this particular lady. Of course, they made it for over and above, and so she needed to send the cash back. She thought something wasn't quite right. And so when she went to cash that check, she actually fanned out the money and took a picture of it. And that helped us because I have serial numbers from those dollar bills. And so when we track that package down, it's in this particular state. And we got the guy he's at a college there, and their dean went and our dean of the student affairs went and found him, and he had the package sitting in the back of his pickup or his vehicle, his car, and it's still got all of the funds in there. It was a FedEx package. So we called him and we called law enforcement, and they went and they were actually able to confiscate that. We have since issued our search warrant, and we have the funds back in here. It's until we go to trial on that. But they actually, Dakota State University, they do a lot for us. And we did our search warrant, and they were able to gather 3 phones and 2 laptops. I don't know what college kid needs 3 cell phones and 2 laptops. So, and the things that they were able to find on those particular laptops, when they did the forensic audit, is this gentleman was not only doing this particular scam, but he was also doing SBA loans, fraudulent SBA loans, other scams. When they dug further into his emails, they found that he was actually a victim of the same type of scam. And that is routinely what we find with our, if we can locate our scammers, is that at one point they were scammed themselves, because there's emails in there specifically asking the guy, our scammer is asking his originating scammer, how did you do this? Okay, what steps did you take to make this seem more realistic? And so we have all of that. Unfortunately, that particular state and the FBI would not take it. And so we brought everything back here, and I said, well, we have 1 victim, but we have an obligation. I know where this guy is, and we're going to go forward. And we did a grand jury, and they indicted. So there is an arrest warrant out for him. So if we can locate him, we have an obligation, I feel, to bring them back. And this guy will end up getting kicked out of the country because he is here on a visa. So he's from Rwanda. So those are some of the things that we're working on heavily with those. So to kind of go back to that, I think there's a lot of them that are here in the United States. Again, because it's big money. We've done some other things with Texas was one state in particular where we had actually gathered a ton of information, and it was organized crime to where they were, we felt that it was a Russian group, and they were tracking in New York, where you could actually see when they were using credit cards, the different stolen credit cards and so forth. And we gave it all to Homeland. Unfortunately, we haven't heard anything, so, but they're here.
I feel like the stigma, like you get hacked or whatever, scammed, and it's overseas, right?
Yeah.
And it's a lost cause, but I don't think a lot of people think how much is actually happening.
Yeah, and I think we take the premise too that, if you've got somebody here in the United States that's still allowing those funds to come into a bank account because they're doing it from a work at home I guess, because that's how most of them get in contact. We still have that obligation to reach out to them to say, do you realize that you are somewhat what we consider kind of a money mule? And once you've been notified by law enforcement that this is what it is, and you continue to do this, you're no longer a victim, you're part of the problem. And so we take a different look at that then. If you're going to continue to do this and you're going to allow funds to come in, you should be prosecuted just like anybody else. And that might seem harsh, but at some point you got to stop the bleeding too. So those are some of the things that we work with through our office, or that we try to locate and do something about. So, please have other questions? No, this is going to make short.
About
other ones?
2 minutes, so you're probably.
Are the majority of your victims, the consumer victims, elderly still?
No, I would say, the majority of all of our sweepstakes, are elderly people, yes. The two, pig butchering ones are elderly. They would fall underneath that criteria. You know, that started off again through a dating scam, that they were on a dating site, they get pulled off, same type of thing, but then it morphed into this investment. And it's gonna be, for this one particular lady, it's gonna be pretty detrimental. Cause that one's tough for us to find and locate. So, and it did go to, we could see that it is a fraudulent investments website, so. Actually, I think DSU actually did some searching for us on that particular one for us.
Does she
So,
believe you?
uh,
Does she believe you? Because the ones that I've seen, they refuse to believe that it's fake.
she's, we've got to sit down with her and show her, you know, the actual hard documentation. She continues to ask the questions, all of the ones of the sweepstakes, you know, I've literally met face to face with all of them. And they just won't. The gentleman in, Platt, 2 weeks ago, the wife took the vehicle, and I thought that it was mostly him that was responsible for it, and it's not. She's just as culpable. She took their vehicle and drove it to Mitchell and sold their vehicle.
Oh my
Had no idea how she was going to get back to Platt. I mean, it's to that extent. She went to also, before she sold the vehicle, she went to buy 5 new cell phones, the 15s. Is that what they are? The 15s. I mean, it's gonna cost quite a bit, but she was supposed to get 5 phones. The story is with her, she said that they're all for her grandchildren. Well, her grandchildren won't have anything to do with her at this point because they can't get her convinced. So the one grandchild lives actually in Mitchell. And so their son, who lives in Sioux Falls, called and said, can you go pick grandma up? She's sitting at Walmart. She doesn't have a way back. The grandchild, and this is pretty extensive in my opinion, would not allow her in their home. He made her sit out in the backyard because he wanted nothing to do with her whatsoever. And so they finally got a family friend that came from Platt to pick her up and take her back. And now she's trying to sell their camper. It's a nice camper and she wants next to nothing for it. And so she'll get it sold and she'll send the money on to them. So they're pretty egregious. And, you know, the big picture with your elderly is that a lot of people don't see the bigger picture is that once they're out of funds and something happens to them, wintertime comes, they slip, fall, and they end up in the nursing home for rehab. They have no funds, but Medicaid, is a 7-year look back. You're gonna have to show what you did with those funds because those funds were available to you. So if you don't fill out the police report or file something with their office, they can deny you those access to those funds. So that's kind of the bigger picture with them, and we'll see how that one's gonna pan out. I have to go there here in 2 weeks and talk with them, see if they'll give me the rest of the information. But it's kind of the doom and gloom hour. I apologize, but that's kind of what we deal with in our office. Some days are better than others. And I was telling Katie, there's days when I just want to go to a deserted island and put my head in the sand. So, and then the next day I get up, go and do it again. So, and thank you guys. If you guys have questions or have anybody that, you know, has, you know, anything that you think is unique, I always like to hear the different things because that's the only way that I can alert others of the different trends that are happening. So give our office a call. Should have, like I said, should have had it up there, but it is consumer protection with the Attorney General's office. So thank you.